Hey y'all, Jason again from the D2 with more special coverage of Total Chaos. Up next is an interview with Nate Shaw, a CG supervisor for Method Studios. At Total Chaos, he talked about hair, specifically the hair on the Rocket Raccoon character from the Guardian of the Galaxy series.
Oh, that's the button that will kill everyone! Try again.
He's also worked on many other feature films, so check the video to hear about that. So enjoy the interview, make sure you subscribe, we've got a lot of content coming out, and I'll see you for the next one.
Hi guys, welcome back to the D2 channel. My name is Fabio Palvelli. Today I'm here with Nate Shaw of Method Studio.
That's correct.
Dude, thanks a lot for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Now guys, I know that usually you are used to some more archivist related talks, but this time I really wanted to bring something from a different industry and something that, hopefully will inspire you to find a way, put it this way. Nate, we had a chance to talk a little bit before getting to this interview. I kind of want to ask you, how did you get started to, into this world, which is, how can we define it? VFX?
Yeah, that's a good term, or animation is closely related. So when I graduated school, I had a degree in painting and printmaking, which turns out is not that lucrative of a career. I did some random things after school. And eventually I decided, I really wanted to learn Photoshop. So the best way to do that was to go back to school, I guess, for me. So I did that, and then I ended up learning a lot more than Photoshop. And the program that I went to was Drexel University in Philadelphia. And it was a good program, and a lot of the students there that I met, they were really into visual effects. So it was kind of me. I went there to learn Photoshop. I learned that pretty quickly, I guess, as it's a deep program, but you can kind of get the basics pretty quickly. So then I just started learning Maya, learning another software like that. And then eventually when my friends moved to LA, I also moved to LA.
I want to ask you because, a lot of people, see the difficulties of the technical aspect of doing things, but you said, you were a painter. Mm-hmm. How old were you when you decided then to go back and study Photoshop?
I think I was 25 or so.
Okay, yeah. So we have very similar patterns here.
I see, yeah. I still think that's young, looking back now, it's I was pretty young at that time.
Was it hard to get into the technical aspect of things, or?
I think I'd always had a interest, at least, or aptitude for math and stuff like that. So the technical aspect was something that still kind of interested me. It's like you can solve visual problems with the skills that you learn. You can also solve technical problems. And I kind of feel like often it's the same thing. There's, and not to sound anti-art, but there's a lot of formulas you can use for art that's there's composition rules, and there's also rules to programming, for example.
I say this all the time to my students because I teach at the university, and now coming from you, this is very comforting in a way,
Right.
There was a gap, basically, of 5 years in your career? Because what time did you graduate, and when did you?
That's correct. I guess it was, I think I was out of school at age 21, and then by the time I ended up back at school, it was probably 25 or 26, or something like that.
What were you doing in between?
The first thing I did is I moved back with my parents, as some people do, and I just was looking for work and trying to pay off student loans, because I still had that from. So I had worked in an office, but then I also, as I had mentioned earlier, I was a pedicab driver, which is basically, if you don't know what that is, it's a bike with a couch on wheels behind it. And it was in a college town, so it was kind of a party, a moving party, basically. Roll out up to bars and ring my bell, and then people would hop on, and I'd take them to the next party. Yeah.
This is so cool. Now, I love that, you can share so much of your experience, because very often things like this can have an influence on what happens next, Did that happen with you, or was it just by chance that then you decided to go and learn Photoshop and then, started your career?
I don't know if it was so much that. It was basically an unsustainable career. Yeah. I got injured after a while, so I couldn't really do that anymore. And then I was also working I was working indoors. I had a second job, or actually I had 3 jobs at the time. and it was kind of an office job where it was really monotonous work, just data entry basically. And I was like, I can't do that. It's just, it was the worst. So then I kind of went on a period of just random jobs where, I worked in South Florida as a forestry tech, basically killing non-native plants. And let's see, I was a firefighter in Central California.
Seriously, also.
Yeah. So that was interesting. I got to see a lot of fire effects in real life, because I mean, Central California is always like on fire basically in the summer. So every week we'd go to a couple fires or something.
This is so interesting to me. It's because there is always so much more to the job aspect. Okay, so then you become an artist. Mm-hmm. What was your first job?
The first job. Well, I worked in Philadelphia it was actually one of my professors gave me some work, and it was medical animation.
Okay.
And it was, looking back at it, just looks terrible. But and that was because I was a brand new out of school artist. But yeah, so it was that kind of thing. It was just a model of, I think, a throat or something, and it was like a turntable on it to like describe a procedure.
I've seen many of those.
Yeah. They're important. They're really important for, visualizing that kind of thing. But I'd always, I wanted to learn Photoshop too, because I was really interested in storytelling, basically. That's what drew me to art. And that wasn't the kind of work that I really wanted to do. I wanted to do work that was related to some sort of storytelling, like animation or visual effects or film or something.
How did you land your first job working on a movie?
Well, I eventually got through friends who had worked at Side Effects, which is the company that makes Houdini. I worked there just by, again, it was knowing people that I graduated with. And then my mentor at Side Effects worked at Method at the time. So he got me into Method, and then from there, I've just kind of worked there ever since.
Tell me the titles on which you have worked on.
The first one was Beautiful Creatures, which is a teen romance. There might have been vampires, I'm not sure. But it was in that time when a lot of those movies were coming out. There was Divergent. That was actually a fun one to work on. Trying to think, there was Into the Storm, which was a tornado movie. We had, and some of the bigger name ones, as we started getting more and more higher profile work at Method, it was, of course, there was Captain America Civil War, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, recently Spider-Man Homecoming, and I guess most recently was Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them 2. So it's not out yet, but I've worked a bit on that as well.
I've seen the first one, and it was a really good movie.
Yeah, it's good.
So basically, how did you manage to acquire all the skills, for you to go from, say, basic medical representations to doing very advanced look and development and hair? I've seen also in your portfolio, shading, all that kind of stuff. How long did that take you to learn all that stuff?
It was just learning on the job, really. And it's I think it's being not afraid to take chances. And I was lucky in that, especially in the earlier days when I started at Method, it was a smaller company, and they would often throw you into the fire and basically task you with things that you probably were not prepared to do. So it's kind of a mixture of the, being new and being oh yeah, I could totally do this when I probably couldn't, and it was that, or I probably shouldn't. It was that just taking risks and going for it, even if you don't know you're taking a risk in some cases. And it's just learning, from other senior artists, always asking questions, and just, I guess, being humble to know that I knew that I didn't know things, so I would have to try to reach out. And I was lucky that there was a lot of senior artists at Method to go to talk to.
This is, I think, what you just shared. It's very important, because very often what we forget, and this is one of the main rules when you work in design, is that the difference between those who do and those who don't is those who do. Right. As long as you do, you'll learn something, you'll make mistakes, you cannot be afraid of making mistakes, but you'll eventually learn something, right? Yeah,
you learn something, even when you fail, you learn more, I guess, when you do that.
We were talking earlier about the shots from Captain America of Vienna. You know, the D2 conference, which we organize every year, is in Vienna.
Right.
And when I saw the shots in your portfolio, I was like, no way, did he do that? Like the Uno Center? Can you tell me a little bit more about that specific project?
Yeah, so we were working on Captain America, and actually it was a late request from Marvel, and we call them in visual effects, we call them like 911 work, where it comes in and the client knows that this is a late request, and so it's kind of like, it's good to work on them because they're usually paying a little bit more because it's such a late request. And this was one of those shots where they had decided to add an establishing shot for Vienna. And at that time it was winter, actually. We were working on it, it was due out in May, but we were working on it in probably February at that time. And that's when they came to us. They couldn't, because it's a shot, you're talking about the shot of the whole city. So it's a wide shot with several blocks in it. They couldn't just, it's a simple shot insofar as they could fly a helicopter up there, stick the camera out and just go around. But they couldn't do that then because it was wintertime and it wasn't, and in the movie it's not wintertime. So that was kind of why they came to us. They found some footage that they liked, but it was stock footage that was HD. And they just said, this is not big enough, we just want you to do this, but then in CG as well. So we had about a month to do it, and so a couple modelers, texture artists, and then myself doing kind of the layout as well as shading and texturing and placing some things. We had trees in there and cars and characters playing soccer on a soccer field nearby. So there's a lot of little details in there if you look.
Yeah, that probably don't jump to the eye at first, right?
But it's those types of details are important to, you may not notice them, but they're important to give it like life. I actually put some birds in there. I had done flocks of ravens for Divergent actually years before, and I had saved a lot of those caches, and I even put those guys in there. I just put some ravens flying between the buildings. They're like 6 pixels big, but it's still worth it. So.
Now, I'm asking you this because you don't have an architectural background. We talked to an architectural crowd mainly. What were the challenges? I mean, what do you reckon could have helped you in, if you had like an architectural background? Were there like challenges that you had to overcome, or was it just, simple routine work?
Well, I guess for that shot, it wasn't, the challenge was doing it was a lot of manual work to get it to where we needed it to be. There was another building that we did for that movie actually, that maybe had some more challenge. And a lot of times the challenge that we have is making something look photoreal, basically putting it in amongst the plate. So it's gotta sit between like the real film and then what's in the background. So we had this building that it just never felt real, because it was too, basically there wasn't enough dressing on it. So, if you look at a real building, you'll see gutters, you'll see small things that are part of the engineering of the building, I guess. But I don't know. I don't know what is common to put on buildings. All we can do is look at pictures and be like, oh, that's a good thing. Why don't we put that on there? And sometimes it may not even make sense because we don't know. It's movie magic, right? So that's the type of thing that I think would help. Would be, when you're dressing something, like, what are the real things that you would really put on a building? And that's the kind of the realism. Those tiny details that your eye doesn't sit on, but it needs to be there to fill in because you're used to seeing real buildings.
You just don't pay attention to that.
Exactly. It's not like a cool monster that you're like, oh, whatever, but it's something that exists and we're used to seeing that.
Even because the part that you got to visualize, it's considered relatively ugly in Austria, They want to knock that building down.
Ah, right.
Yeah, and they were like, oh, they put that in the movie.
so it was like the big black building. So actually I have a funny story about that one. The footage they gave us didn't have that building.
Okay.
And
so it was a very old footage.
It was old, well, I guess. So I've never been to Vienna, and I guess neither had anyone else that was in the loop on this. And I was looking, because as we do, we get orders from the client, and then you just look for reference. You need to look for reference to, again, make it look real. And I realized that they're like, hey, a second, there's a building there. So we asked the question to the client, Marvel, like, should we put this building in there? And they're like, I guess so. Because it's there. And now it's funny to say that that the city doesn't actually like it. It's kind of...
No. I was talking about the UNO headquarters. You're talking about the Dominic Perot Tower.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
Actually, funny story about that building is that initially that was called the Doors of Vienna, I think, and there were supposed to be two buildings facing each other, and the shape was that they could match perfectly if they were united. So they were like split like this, but they never got the money to finish that, so they just made one.
So it's the door jam of...
yeah, it's just a pole of Vienna.
Yeah, it's the pole of Vienna, right, that's good.
There was one more thing that I wanted to ask you. Do you know architects that have made the transition into VFX, people that may be working with you?
I'm trying to remember. There was actually one of my former instructors at Drexel. He was... I don't know, it was early days when he got into the industry. So he was actually taking a break from the industry when he was my professor. But he had done a master's degree and this was like in the 90s, and talked about using visual effect or graphics or computer graphics for visualization. And so then he told me the story that he had done this paper. He had gone to University of Pennsylvania, and at the time, there was just not that many people that were doing computer graphics. And he had made a website for himself. Again, not that many people had made websites for themselves in the 90s, I guess. And just someone in LA contacted him because he was one of the few people that were doing that type of thing. And they're just like, hey, do you want to work, in movies? And he was like, yeah, that's cool. So he did. So it's funny because he never actually, that was like his background, his studying and everything. But he never actually made it to architecture or architectural visualization, as far as I know. So unless he's done it since.
Nate, thanks a lot for taking the time. I really appreciate it, man. Guys, thanks a lot for watching. I really hope that you'll find this talk inspiring. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.